kingfisher, a flash of blue that intrudes into my thoughts. This is the backdrop to my life, a scene to be enjoyed through all seasons. The path of the water unchanged and unspoiled for centuries. A clean river with virtually every species of fish in the UK, living and breeding here.
For Tom Williams, this stretch of the Hampshire Avon has become almost a part of him. Its waters and the creatures they sustain have been the heart of his working life for a quarter of a century. The foundation of his great love of the outdoors lies in the seasonal rhythms of this river. He looks upon it almost as his own.
I'm a river keeper employed by the Earl of Radnor on the Longford and Trafalgar estates. Lucky, for watching fish bends the mind into reasonable paths of sane and tranquil thought. We have to make an effort for our living, that every need is brought to them by the stream.
Tom has watched over this river for 27 years. His first home was this thatched cottage, sunk in the water meadows.
Now I have this wonderful house for life, with a mill pool and my own tame fish. Trout that I would never harm. This is Charlie, weighs all of 8 pounds. Before the war, I worked with my gamekeeper father in Lancashire for 10 shillings a week, probably as low as any keeper can be. Now I suppose my way of life is the ultimate. My life has been a countryman's delight, drifting through watercolours that haven't changed for 1,000 years, responsible for this 6 miles of the Hampshire Avon, formed by 5 rivers running off the chalk of Wiltshire, flowing into the sea at Christchurch. In my younger years, it used to be a thrill to wear an aqualung, and in the clear, fast-flowing stream observe the underwater life. I'd watch insects swept down from their precarious hold to waiting fish. Most of us have our likes and dislikes, and the chub comes low on my list, for its appetite extends to all river life. But a shoal of roach, bright-eyed and red-finned, come close to the top. They are a delight to the eye, even though their life is often shortened by the predatory pike. Minnows are a fish in their own right, not the young of other fellows. They're gatherers of small morsels, and in turn they are gathered by almost every fish that swims. I liken them to fish fingers on the hoof. I always think the inquisitive perch is magnificent. Dorsal fin erect, like gun dogs of the underwater world, nosing into the weed in search of unwary minnows. When I first go underwater, it's the perch that's first to investigate. What's in it for me attitude to the disturbance.
Tom knows his fish well, not just their names, but their ways. They indicate the health of the river and the change of its seasons. The clarity of the autumn water reveals the now sunken riverweed. The ducks that have merely rested on the river by day gather before moving to spend the night stubbling in the new-cut cornfields. Longford Bridge, the first to cross the Avon below Salisbury, leads to the home of the Earls of Radnor, Longford Castle, an ancient estate with a centuries-old record of good management, to which Tom has added his own effort and skills.
Now, in this clear water river time, you can see what last winter's floods have left you as a present. Water-filled oil drums, dead sheep, even strangers to the watershed, carp, bream, and the occasional goldfish. These are roach and dace. The engine on this boat is Mike Trowbridge, who started his river keeping with me when only 15, and, with a break in the Marines, has been with me ever since. Ospreys follow the north-south path of the Avon on their migration from Scandinavia or Scotland to their winter home in Africa. I love those feet, anticipating a future meal. He appears a little inexperienced. Must be a young bird, for I don't think an adult would have been empty-clawed. He flies off into the mists of autumn, with the river gaining in power from late summer rains.
The hidden turbulence stirs the mud, colouring the water and encouraging the restlessness of eels on the verge of their migration. They wait for the dark side of the moon and this cloak of coloured water before slipping away towards the distant ocean. In a river, fish are always on the move. It's a highway up and down the valley. This eel follows a path leading from the chalk hills of Marlborough to the deep Atlantic. But like many, it may not reach the mouth of Tom's River, as eels have great value as a seasonal crop.
On this night of nights when eels are on the move, flood hatches are closed, and the eel trap hatches are opened so that the water is fed into a giant colander. The trap sieves eels and other debris, descending with the coloured water. To a river keeper, it is fishing on a large scale. You never know what's coming into the eel trap next. Could be anything from a long dead sheep, or as happened in the past, something even more gruesome. But tonight, it's just a lot of eels. Eels from the Avon average £2, though some of £5 or £6 do appear. But river keepers are no different from fishermen in their inclination to exaggerate. The trap upstream was boasting of catching 10 or 11-pound eels, and we in turn tell the story of catching an oil lamp which was still alight. We agreed that if they halved the size of the eels, we would blow up the lamp. The eels are diverted from the normal migration to travel live to the jellied eel and pie shops of London.
Some eels do continue downriver on their October migration, and on the way pass salmon, still with the silver of the sea on their flanks, moving upstream to spawn.
They aren't very obvious at first, but a consummate eyes have the ability to see through the surface film, something that some townsfolk find difficult. See how gentle a swim it is for them to take a small weir as they move to the shallow, fast-flowing stretches to dig their spawning beds in the loose gravel. And because this place is vulnerable, wires are stretched across to hinder the poachers. Lack of vigilance in the past means many salmon have ended up in the surrounding villages, eaten with chips, and why not? For when a countryman is hungry, the river provides. By mid-November, brown trout share the salmon's spawning bed, but breed 6 weeks before their larger relative to avoid damage to their eggs. As is usual in nature, the hen does the work while the cock stands by looking important. Almost a replica of her own lives, I fancy. She lifts the gravel and puts it behind her, lays the eggs, and the male mingles milk to fertilize them. Her tail will become ragged, but will mend before winter is fully upon us.
Migration satisfies a need. The bittern seeks the shelter of the Hampshire Avon to escape the cold winds in East Anglia. Tom watches them in January and February as, shy and virtually invisible, they stalk careless trout and eels. When they vanish, as mysteriously as they came, he knows they've gone to Minsmere or to a quiet corner of the Norfolk Broads. Fish, too, respond to the falling temperatures. They move into deeper, darker waters, even benefiting from the warm springs that bubble up through the gravel riverbed in several parts of this winter-gripped valley. That Flights of wildfowl apparently find this river a paradise in which to spend the hard winter months often makes Tom wonder just what it's like where they come from. This coot lives here all year round. Rather unfairly, the new arrivals on its patch threaten survival. The limited amount of food available must be divided amongst so many more mouths. In the harshest weather, the water meadows alongside the river become a natural sanctuary for flocks of whistling widgeon. Intriguingly, the rough meadows are kept more or less ice-free by the same warm spring waters that benefited the fish. The waters spread over the fields by an ancient system of carriers and drains, built 4 centuries before Tom Williams came to know this river and its inhabitants.
There's one scruffy citizen that pops up everywhere, the little grebe, the urchin of the river, and a bit of a villain, for it sits on the end of the salmon redds and feasts on their eggs when they spawn.
A sudden thaw sends the river over its banks and into the woods. The flood hatches are opened, and the flashboards are out of the weir. Salmon kelts, exhausted after spawning, are swept rapidly back to the sea, while in gentler water, the coarse fish feed in preparation for laying their eggs in the coming spring. Shoals of roach pick delicately at plants and insects, acquiring the oil and fat that will sustain them through these lean months.
They prefer to feed in this coloured flood water. Perhaps it gives them an air of security, but the combined senses of the shoal are forever on the alert for danger. In such cold winter conditions, the shoal ambles from one bit of cover to another, conserving energy for more strenuous times. It's a fish of lakes, ponds and canals, as well as rivers, and is universally popular with anglers. For most, a 2-pound roach is a fish of a lifetime. Wider-ranging chub often swim with the roach, for their tastes are somewhat similar, though chub do include young roach in their diet. The cold makes all fish lethargic, very much as above the surface, where the river keeper is likewise affected. You can walk the riverbank, but without these canine companions, you would never know what passed this way in the night. They will follow the scent of a mink or the much rarer otter, discovering where they left the riverbank and swam into the reeds, where scent lingers on the surface. The dogs once found a freshly dead snipe with an 8-year-old ring on its leg. In a river valley, it's only the keeper and perhaps his dogs that survive a similar length of time.
Come on, bird.
March in the heronry brings back the wide-awake heron to reconstruct last year's nest and dispute new sites. As the chicks in the nest grow, the love-hate relationship twixt bird and riverkeeper is renewed. Many trout go to feed the young that we who look after anglers might resent. But we do them no harm, for they are part of the balance of nature. Whilst we try to make fish populations artificially high, they merely try to reduce them to normal levels. Oh, to be a riverkeeper now that spring's here, for we get that first real scent that winter is behind us. The sun grows warm, there's a slowing down of flow and an increase in water temperature, encouraging me out of hibernation to await the first big fly hatch of the year.
These are the kind of caddisfly fishermen know as granum. As larvae, they lived in cases attached to weeds in the flowing water. Emerging sometimes as early as March, they immediately migrate upriver to compensate for the downstream drift of their young.
This oh so short mating happens only once a year, some years not at all. They have to lay their eggs on vegetation underwater, but have difficulty breaking the surface film. Their life's task complete, they drift downstream and die to provide a feast for hungry chub. This glut is manna to fish, seeking to rebuild their condition after a winter diet. But surface feeding fish compete with surface feeding birds. Grey wagtails are full insect life here to feed their young. His Lordship's boathouse provides a quiet corner for the nest. Eight young is fairly typical and guaranteed to keep Mum and Dad busy as they compete with other insect eaters recently arrived from Africa. Sedge warblers chatter noisily as they declare their territories. Their clamour giving me a real feeling of spring. Then pike spawning confirms it. Gathering in the shallows below the weir, a small cock pike assists a larger hen in this mating ritual, shedding her eggs in the dense weed bed, and the small cockfish may be a meal for air after the honeymoon. Over the years, you get to know where to see fish and how to look. There's one particular fast shallow that's ideal for barbel, a fish much sought after by anglers. It is a shy creature, not suffering fools lightly, and in terms of strength, the equal of salmon. But unlike the salmon, the barbel's mating dance has to be a communal affair, otherwise breeding will not take place. I have a sense of possession for these barbel, for we brought these other parents from the River Kennet to Tungerford 25 years ago and stocked this stretch. Since then they've thrived. Those pale patches are where the barbel are spawning. As their eggs expand in the water, they become adhesive enough to stick to the gravel, a necessity in the fierce current that these fish favour. In its turn, the water weed prevents itself from being washed downstream by burying its roots in the gravel and forms a baffle which protects vulnerable snails and insects such as caddis larvae. The weed is like trees in a forest, giving off oxygen during the day and taking it in at night, giving life to all creatures of the river. The surfaces of the weed are covered with a layer of plankton, which is constantly washed downstream, food for all in the river. One of those who benefits most is the ever-present minnow, a lover of the well-oxygenated shallows and most numerous of all fish, perhaps the most important in the Avon, for in its various age groups, it's taken by every other fish. They're the bread and butter of this river, for so many die and yet so many live. In mid-May they gather into large shoals and like a thick rope move upstream to spawn. They could be said to be miniature salmon, seeking out the rapids and even swimming up small falls. They have a very short lifespan, 3 years at the most, so maybe to compensate they spawn 2 or 3 times a year. When they are ready to spawn, they congregate in the shallows and grow distinctive white markings, and males become quite red. Their eggs are unusually large for the size of the fish, so they lay comparatively few. Pike provide an ever-present threat, not just to minnows, but to dace, roach and chub. This particular roach is showing signs of spawning garb, pale growths sprouting out. We're keen to encourage roaches to spawn, for their numbers have declined in recent years, so we adjust the river flow to create just the right conditions.
Tom must maintain the water level upstream, so these hatches must be closed once the flow of the river slackens. The place Tom's chosen as ideal for roach spawning lies a little way up the bank from the main hatches. It's an old trout stew, or pond, put to new use. There's only a few days in the year when sun and water temperature combine to attract the roach. Fontinalis weed gathered from the weir and stapled to a board in the strong flow creates the ideal conditions for egg laying. For a few hours, the roach develop a spawning frenzy and completely forget their fear. They have deliberately moved upstream too, so that their fry are less likely to be washed into the sea.
Once they've finished laying the eggs, we'll collect some and raise them in an aquarium, feed them on, and release the thousands of fry, having protected them through the most vulnerable part of their lives. But that's not all we'll do for them. We'll stock the roach into backwaters which flow into the river proper, and, in order to improve their chances of survival, remove some of the pike. We'll catch them by passing an electric current through the water, which momentarily stuns the fish, but does them no lasting harm. These are roach we stocked last year, but all the fish are affected briefly. That's a 3/4 pound brownie. Here comes the 3-year-old pike. We must have missed him last year. We don't kill them, but detain them briefly in this holding tank. Our engine is once again Mike Trowbridge, and his son Martin, the assistant. That's a 5-year-old, a fine-looking female, not far off spawning. We released the pike into the fish farm where they lived the life of Riley on trout casualties. But I don't suppose they appreciate the change, despite their assured diet. For here, they must search for their food rather than wait for the river current to bring it to them. Removing predators also has its benefits when we release trout for our anglers, for very few pike are allowed to grow big enough to threaten brown trout this size. It takes these fish 2 or 3 days to settle down, to get used to the fact that the man with the feed bucket isn't visiting 3 times a day. Then they'll feed on anything that comes into their vision, even if it's a clumsy cast fly on the end of a line. These conditions are the happy hunting ground for anglers we term fishmongers, who will stoop to devious methods to take their limit, or even more, ignoring the beauty of the fish and the sporting spirit of a true countryman. The trout that survived the first onslaught develop a wisdom beyond the years. We used to say that where the wise trout lies, you can see where the elephant stood. Anglers whose every brute and line must look like a wire hawser to an intelligent fish. The coot and the moorhen, like the trout, eat insects, amongst other things, and compete, but not on friendly terms, particularly when young moorhens have just hatched. Aggressive postures are taken up, but if the intruder isn't put off, then it's war. You must admit that the moorhen is a great cause of commotions, whereas the coot is normally a little more docile. Mid-June, and to a person like me, who's an habitual gateliner, it's perhaps the most wonderful time of the year. We've been without rain for so long that only the chalk hills above us, holding a reservoir of water, keeps the river alive. Low water washes no soil from the bank or bed. Sediment settles and water clears, so the beds reveal like a giant aquarium. Fish drift sideways as you approach, seeking to hide in the weed. They still have plenty to eat. Algae coats the stones and is eaten by minnow and caddis. They try to camouflage themselves with building materials that merge them into the background, but this isn't always successful. The graceful grayling, sometimes referred to as the lady of the stream, sucks in caddis and stones by the mouthful and takes what she needs, ejecting the rest. She must have a mouth like a coffee grinder. A large dorsal fin is used like a sail of a yacht, assisting her against the prevailing current. The river also provides for other mouths. Young coots have left the nest and are fed on weed and the insects that cling to it. Meat and veg in each mouthful.
There are swans on Tom's River too. Besides beauty, their presence has a more practical role. Their droppings, pungent enough to repel cattle from where the swans gather in winter, add fertilizing nitrates to the bright water, which encourages the growth of food for fish. That's good news both for Tom and the great crested grebe.
Normally, grebes are so shy that even the riverkeeper doesn't get as close as this. But when I do, it's a revelation to see their markings. It was as if nature got carried away with the makeup. The cockbird provides most of the food for the chicks. Hunting small fish, sometimes small eels, but usually it's the poor old minnow. not a keen angler, I make an exception for his lordship's dinner table. Salmon that have moved up in the spring seek the shadow of overhanging trees, or in this case Longford Bridge, and there they sit under the middle arch, almost comatose, waiting for their eggs to mature for a winter spawning. If their minds are capable of considering the future, let's give them a reminder of the past. Their food at sea includes the prawn, so we'll test that memory. This must surely be an angler's lucky dip, or unlucky. You never know whether there's a fish there, and, if so, its size. It could be anything from 6 pounds to 36. You can't see the fish and he can't see you. See, we've hooked the bottom, and you tighten on the bottom, and you can come up with anything from a bunch of weed. Oh, whoa, 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 it's moving. Something else, it's a fish. He's a good one too. He's a 20-pounder, Mike. He's coming up onto the far side now. My God, he is a good one, Mike. See him now? Yeah, he's hooked all right in the right place. Not as fresh as the one we had the other day, Mike. Fishing is a great class leveler. We have anglers from dukes to dustmen, from layabouts to lawyers. All are equal within a common interest. The only connection between us is the riverbank and this passion for fishing. Oh! $20, Mike? That's worth a couple of scotches, Mike, isn't it? This fish that returned to the place of its birth has brought its richness from the ocean. It seems a shame for its life to end like this, but it's a legitimate part of the river's crop. 18, Mike.
Yeah, thereabouts, for me.
Lovely. It looked heavier in the water, didn't it? When it was going. Didn't have to go at times, didn't it? Yeah. Mind you, I think wouldn't have had the tension on quite as hard.
By the beginning of August, the volume of water flowing downstream is only a trickle compared with the powerful surge of early spring. The sedges, rushes and river weed have reached the end of their growth and have but a short life ahead before the autumn decay. But whilst the weed survives, it does the essential task of holding the water back and keeping the water table high and the riverside fields green. Tom has watched closely over his river for more than a quarter of a century. This year, he's making his last professional round as river keeper.
Below the surface, the comings and goings of fish have more or less ceased. The river, at its lowest, all hatches are closed. There's little water to spare for the weirs. Flowers hedge the paths and fields, creating interest as I walked the river. In the shallows, this year's half-grown minnows mingle with the fry of other fish, providing a ready feast for predators preparing for the winter. Pike sit cheek by jowl with trout, but it's in the evenings when the prey must be on the alert, for then the carnivores of the river are on the prowl. Perch move out of deeper water to hunt minnows, safe in a shoal, but not if they feed on their own. Got away, but not for long. Magnificent fish, isn't it? Autumn, back full circle. The year on the river ends or starts again. I've been watching water here for 27 years, and each year's different. Drought years, flood years, years when salmon never came up and eels never went down. And now, on my retirement, it's as if it's beginning all over again. Time has gone so quickly. More than half my work in life on this one patch. But each day, there's been something new. And it hasn't ended even now. For Mike, who has taken over, would have to ban me from the water if that's to be the end of it. But as he won't, I hope for a few more years to drift with the stream.